This is the only video you're going to need if you want to cure your procrastination. This is something I used to struggle with for a very long time. And I'll tell you the number one problem. A lot of people focus on the how, never the why. If you don't know why you procrastinate, the how doesn't matter. Because what I used to do before was I would find all of these practical steps, break down your goals, make sure they're very clear. But then the cycle always used to repeat itself because I never knew why. And if you're someone like me and you feel like you're very ambitious and you procrastinate a lot, that is definitely the most depressive lifestyle to live, because you know you're capable of so much more, but because you're not achieving it due to you procrastinating, it is horrible. And I don't know if you guys ask yourself where your life would be if you weren't a procrastinator. You'd probably be in better shape, better career, more money, better relationships, and most importantly, better mental health. So this is what this video is going to be about. From the beginning to the end, we're going to go through why you procrastinate, and it isn't because of laziness. And then we're going to get into some practical steps that you can implement from today. One disclaimer I want to make though, this isn't a video to get rid of procrastination. That doesn't really exist. Every single human on this planet procrastinates. As I said, no 2 days are the same. Today I could be very energetic, good morning, good breakfast, went to the gym, I'm pumped. I could probably do a lot more work and I can do it on the spot as it comes up. But then I may wake up the next day and I might be completely tired. On both of those days, the work still gets done. But the time it takes me, maybe I might drag my feet. I may have a slow morning, which is normal. It may take me an extra 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. So the aim of the game isn't to get rid of procrastination, but there's a difference between a chronic procrastinator and a general procrastinator. Chronic procrastinators genuinely need help. General procrastination depends on your energy levels and your current mental state. So let's get into this. First thing I want to talk to you guys about is why we procrastinate to start with, right? This is what this section is going to be about. First thing, contrary to belief, procrastination has nothing to do with laziness. Procrastination is all to do with the way your brain perceives what it is that you're doing. If your brain sees what you're doing as a threat, it is going to stop you because we are wired for survival. If you look at it from an evolutionary perspective, once upon a time, we were all a part of tribes and there was potential dangers, people coming, invading, taking your provisions, killing, etc., etc., etc. That evolutionary part of our brain has never evolved. But in this modern day and age where there's an absence of danger, your brain starts to perceive random things as threats. Something as simple as opening my laptop and doing work could trigger some alarm bells in my brain, which we're about to get into, which will then prevent me from doing work. So anytime you say, I'll do it later, your brain is trying to protect you because your brain thinks that there's a threat out there. This is the part where it's going to get slightly scientific, but I'm going to speak of it in a very simple way. There are 3 brains running your life. The lower, which is the brainstem, is your reptilian brain. Right? This is the animalistic side of us, the primal side of us. Then you got the middle brain, the emotional side. And then the new brain, the rational side. The reptilian or the brainstem is predominantly made up of the survival part. So, fight or flight, food, intimacy, and so on and so forth. Everything that makes us animalistic, right? Fight or flight, wanting to eat, and intimacy. Animals have this. Then you get the mammalian side, which is the emotional side. Everything we do in life is filtered through pain or pleasure, right? Is the thing that you're doing bringing you pleasure? Fantastic, double it. Is it bringing me pain? I don't really like it. Is it worthwhile? Should I endure it or should I never do it again? Then we get the logical side of our brain, which is the planning, the focus, the identity, all the things that matter. But let me tell you the most interesting part out of all of this. In order for you to do something monumentous, start a career, go to the gym, talk to that person you're really interested in, it has to go through the following layers. Number 1, it has to start at the reptilian brain. Number 2, it goes through the emotional or the middle brain. And then it gets to your rational part. As I said, every decision passes through the lower 2 before reaching logic. So now, can we start to think about where things potentially go wrong? Because if you think about it, before things reach the logical side of our brain, for example, I know I have to go to the gym because it's going to better my life, it's going to put me in better shape. I know I have to start applying for those jobs and changing careers because I know it's going to change my life. Before it gets to that stage, something has to go wrong here. The emotional side of our brain or the reptilian side. So now, the alarm bell system is to blame. Right? The alarm system in our brain, which is the mammalian side, if you look at it, right? So the mammalian brain has an alarm. this part of your brain, the middle brain. And it can't tell the difference between a real threat or an uncomfortable task. That's the unfortunate reality. So anytime you want to do something, your brain can't tell if this is a real threat or it's an uncomfortable task. So what does it say? This feels hard, let's escape. Which is why anytime you want to do something, depending on whether you are a rookie or you've been doing this for quite some time, anytime you pick up something, going to the gym, reading a book, doing something that isn't very attractive at the start, you freeze, you scroll, you snack, or you shut down. So when you guys start understanding that there's something big at play, the middle brain is something that we need to cater to. My whole philosophy is regulate your emotions and your nervous system, and you would literally never struggle again. So now, I hope you guys are starting to understand that your procrastination has nothing to do with laziness. There's an alarm bell system that triggers in your mind that really leads to a lot of these things. For example, you sit down to update your CV and you apply for new roles. You know that logically, as I said, let's go back, let's filter this. If it was to go from top down, our lives would be amazing. But you know logically that applying for these jobs, applying for these new roles is going to get you to where you need to be. But suddenly what happens? You feel overwhelmed by all the tabs. You doubt if you're even good enough. You start thinking, what if I get rejected? Alarm bells start ringing in the middle brain. So now you close your laptop and you convince yourself you'll start fresh tomorrow. How many of you guys can relate to that? I used to do this a lot. I would literally say, you know what? Can't be bothered. I'm just going to do it next time. And it isn't because you're unmotivated. Your brain thinks avoiding the task equals staying safe. So now there's an emotional irregulation going on. There's the emotional dysfunction happening in our brain where anytime we want to do something big, there's an alarm bell that goes off here, which forces us to then retreat and say, you know what? I don't feel good. This doesn't feel nice. You know what? I'm going to do it tomorrow. Fully knowing that you're not going to do it tomorrow. The only nullifier, the only thing that actually gets rid of all of this emotional stuff is when we have a real deadline. For example, if I know that I've got to submit an assignment tomorrow morning, and it is about 5 p.m. the day before, I have no choice but to do it. But that's because there's something really on the line. But for something general, like getting in shape, getting into a good career, doing something that matters in your life, again, you need to understand that once the alarm bells start ringing, you really shut down and you decide to do something that completely is irrelevant. Which is why I'm also a firm believer that you can't think through things. You know, when somebody says, oh, just have willpower and do it, the David Goggins method. David Goggins gives the worst advice out there, because if you don't understand why is it that the alarm bells go off, willpower doesn't help you at all. Because even if your logical brain wants to act, your emotional brain already triggered a threat response. So the task feels unsafe, even if it isn't. So we're going to kind of go through how to regulate the emotional side of your brain, because I don't believe willpower works for anyone. It may work temporarily, but it doesn't last. Next thing we're going to kind of get into is why willpower doesn't work. As I mentioned to you guys, you shouldn't be relying on willpower. Because what happens when you try to push through? The whole David Goggins mindset of, push through, force it, make sure you do it irrespective. You use motivations, you set goals, you force discipline. But after a few days, or for a few days it works, but eventually you crash. And one thing I've been advising everyone that has been watching me for quite some time is, the motivation you have in the beginning isn't the real version of you yet. And the reason why I say this so confidently is when your motivation is high and dopamine is very high, it is almost easy to do anything. When you first start something, as I said, you sign up to the gym, you're like, okay, I just paid money. Let me go to the gym for the first time. You buy new trainers, you buy a jumper. You're like, you know what? I'm ready. I looked the part. You now go to the gym 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days goes by, but eventually wears out. Because that version of you that you were when dopamine was very high, motivation was very high, was just an illusion. And then you crash back down. So what ends up happening in this situation? Most people fall for what I call the motivation trap. You tell yourself, if I just focus on the reward, I'll do it. Let me give you an example. You launch an agency and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to focus on making 10K per month and I'm going to stick with it. But the reality is your emotional brain doesn't care about future rewards. I want you guys to start accepting the reality that your brain is your enemy. Your brain likes comfort. It likes things that keeps it peaceful. It doesn't like to go out of its comfort zone. It doesn't like to do things that are challenging, right? So your emotional brain doesn't actually care about future rewards. It only responds to what is good right now. I'm going to teach you guys how to reframe the reward system in your mind. However, The reason why motivation doesn't work is if you just focus on the reward, how long does that last? Gym, another example. If you sign up to the gym because you want to get very lean, yeah, that might motivate you in the beginning, but does that motivate you long term? Because your brain doesn't care about the future. Your brain sees the version of you in the future as a stranger. It doesn't really care about it. It only cares about what makes it feel good. Now, for example, you say you apply to jobs today because in 6 months you have a new career. That's your logical side. You're like, you know what? In 6 months, I'll have a new career. This career is going to bring me more money, more opportunities, so on and so forth. But when you sit down, this is the alarm bell system ringing. You feel tired, uncertain, or overwhelmed, and you suddenly feel like scrolling is easier. Why? Because as I said to you, your brain likes what gives it comfort in the moment. Scrolling gives you instant relief, job applications don't. Because you know, job application means that there is also a potential that I may not get the job. There's also a potential that all of my efforts may go to waste. There isn't no immediate reward there. So what does your brain do? Boom, shuts down. And then you start scrolling because that gives you the instant dopamine. Your brain will always choose short-term comfort over long-term gain, which is why motivation isn't something you should rely on. We're going to get into the practical sides later on. The next one, the long-term goal mistake, the thing that I have started to do less of. And let me make a preface here. I want you guys to understand that someone who has regulated their emotions and their nervous system can set long-term goals. But if you're somebody that is really dysfunctional, you procrastinate a lot and you're trying to set long-term goals, it doesn't work. You set big goals, vision boards, 6 months plans, you write it all out. Yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be in this place. Your brain doesn't care about next year. Matter of fact, your brain doesn't care about the version of you tomorrow, which is why, have you ever wondered where you could have work tomorrow morning and you know that you've got a very long day at work, and logically you know that sleeping early would give you a better day tomorrow because of how stressful the day is, but yet you spend a few extra hours gaming, fully knowing that you've got work tomorrow. You go out with your friend, you come home really late, fully knowing that you've got work tomorrow, because your brain prioritizes what makes it feel good now. That's where discipline kicks in, by the way, because your brain really likes what makes it feel good now. It doesn't care about tomorrow, which is why sometimes you wake up tomorrow and you regret what you did yesterday. You might set up the version of you tomorrow for success or failure. You get to decide that. So when it comes to long terms, your brain doesn't really register that if you're very dysfunctional. It only likes what makes it feel good today. Otherwise, it resists. So what do most people do instead when things don't work out? Long-term goals don't work out, and so on and so forth. A lot of you guys take it wrong, or you do it in a very wrong way. As I said, you focus on the how without knowing the why. So what do? You focus on willpower, deadlines, guilt, negative self-talk. I used to be a victim of this. I'll try to force willpower, create the most stupid deadlines. You know, I have to do 5 pages by tomorrow night or today night. I have to post 20 videos in the next 3 days. And then because I know it isn't possible, I then feel guilt and negative self-talk. But one thing I want you guys to take away, contrary to what you see on the internet, hustle culture, David Goggins, Andrew Tate, all of these people that spew nonsense to you, if you give yourself negative self-talk and you add more stress, stress shuts the brain down. And guess what it does? It creates a feedback loop. I talk about feedback loops a lot. Every time you try something, simply because you're doing too much too soon, and then you stop, your brain collects evidence. And what do you tell yourself? See, I don't finish things. And this is how you build a failure identity. You're not failing the task, you're reinforcing the story, which is why people that DM me, people that I come into contact with, they're always saying, oh, bro, I tried it. I don't think I can do it. And it reaches a stage called learned helplessness. I want you guys to remember this forever. Learned helplessness is a case where somebody has tried, failed, and then they reach a point where they don't even bother trying anymore because they know it is going to fail. And it isn't because they are not capable of finishing the task, it's because of the stories that they've reinforced multiple times over to then create this feedback loop. Which is why victims exist for a reason. You could literally give someone the game plan today as to how they can change their life. But if they've had a lot of negative feedback loops and they've developed learned helplessness, good luck, right? And that's the problem when you try to stress yourself out by negative self-talk, guilt, deadlines, and willpower, right? Because if you think about it, deadlines, pressure, self-hate, they don't motivate. They just raise your stress. And from a psychological, scientific perspective, stress kills your long-term thinking and builds up or burns up your energy. There's a reason why they say stress kills. Hustle culture makes you think that stress is a good thing and, stressing all the time is amazing. Don't get me wrong. Stressing because you're doing something new is natural. But I'm saying deadlines, pressurizing, and self-hating, talking down on yourself isn't something that adds any benefit into your life. And I can almost promise you it doesn't work. Hustle culture propagates this idea. Try it. Most of you guys have tried it before. Have you tried to call yourself, a piece of bleep? Or you try to talk down on yourself, I'm just a loser, I'm a bum, thinking that that is going to motivate you? It doesn't. All you're doing is literally creating a feedback loop, and you're telling yourself a story which you're going to believe when push comes to shove. So now we're going to kind of get into the real causes of procrastination. And this is a very important part of this video. There's 4 main causes of resistance or procrastination. Number 1, indifference, when there's no emotional reward. We're going to break each one of these down individually. Distraction, your brain chases stimulation. Indecision, your fear of choosing wrong. And lastly, anxiety, your nervous system panics. The first one is indifference. And this is something I usually advise to people. If you're doing something and you want to eliminate procrastination, make sure you have a reward. And the reward could be anything, right? Whenever your brain asks, or whenever you want to do something and your brain asks this question of what do I get out of doing this right now? If there's nothing, you will definitely procrastinate, because your brain runs on reward systems. If there's no short-term dopamine hit, your brain checks out. And you can actually create healthy dopamine hits within reason to actually keep you doing a task. That's why, for example, when you open LinkedIn and suddenly feel exhausted, there's no payoff until weeks, months later, which is why you don't really want to do it, because when you open LinkedIn and you want to start applying and actually doing things, the reason why you feel indifferent, which then forces you to procrastinate, is there's no real payoff. You're thinking, it takes weeks and months to actually get a job. What's the point? The next one, distraction. This is one that you all understand very well. Your brain is built to notice what's loud, new, urgent, or shiny, or as you guys call it, shiny object syndrome. So even if you plan to have a deep focus session, one ping, one thought, one scroll can pull you away from everything that matters. Which is why, funnily enough, have you noticed when you have something really important to do, like apply for jobs, cleaning your room becomes interesting all of a sudden, opening Instagram and checking emails becomes interesting all of a sudden. So another reason for procrastination is distraction, your brain chasing stimulation. This is a very unspoken about one, very interesting to me. One of the reasons we procrastinate is the fear of the unknown. Your fear of choosing wrong. You think to yourself, what if I make the wrong decision? Because your brain doesn't just fear failure, it fears the unknown. Which is why sometimes whenever you want to do something monumentous, like for example, creating content, starting a business, putting yourself out there, you procrastinate doing the thing because it is so scary to put yourself out there and you don't know if it's going to work out or not. It's safer to do nothing than risk doing it wrong in our minds, which is why most of you guys spend hours researching options and taking zero action. I remember even when it came to creating content, right? This was the thing that made me procrastinate the most. And it really takes someone honest to become very transparent about this. How many of you guys can say the reason why I don't want to do the things that I'm doing is because I'm scared of making the wrong decision, or I'm scared of the unknown? There's a lot of you guys in this situation, which is why some of you guys have been creating a website for so long rather than getting clients, because that is safe, but getting clients really puts you in a very vulnerable situation. And lastly, your nervous system panics. This is a very unfortunate one that you need to learn to regulate over time. When something feels risky, like failing or being judged, your body reacts. Interviews, talking to strangers on the street. Whenever this happens and your anxiety kicks in, your nervous system becomes jacked, you tense up, overthink, and you shut down. You might be thinking, for example, what if I apply and nobody replies? What if I post this and people judge me? What if I go talk to that person on the street and they call me a creep? Anxiety is another reason why we procrastinate. The reason why you don't want to do things is because you are so scared of what the repercussions are going to be, right? The other one, or the indecision one, is you being scared of the unknown. This one is more so you being scared of the consequences or the repercussions. What if nobody replies? What if people judge me? Which kind of ties together. It's still with the fear of the unknown, but this is something you have to work on over time. And if you're part of my community, you would know that this is something that we work on through breathing techniques, grounding yourself, slowing down the rate at which you speak and so on and so forth. But these are the 4 reasons why you procrastinate: indifference, distraction, indecision, and anxiety. Now, too much resistance makes you overreact, right? I want you guys to become aware of this. When your resistance is very high, even small things feel big. For example, when you are a chronic procrastinator, a slow laptop literally registers in your mind as "I'll do it later." A blank page, you're not knowing what exactly to do. You don't have a specific plan. You tell yourself, "I don't know where to start. I'll do it later." One glitch, let's say something doesn't work out, your technology, let's say your computer starts becoming very slow, or let's say something just doesn't work out in your favor. Maybe it's not meant to be. And the thing that I've noticed across all procrastinators is you become extremely sensitive to high pressure situations. When you're somebody that chronically procrastinates, any small inconvenience is a literal excuse for you to say, "You know what, I'm good." That's the unfortunate reality. Now, let's get into how to rewire your brain for action. First thing we need to acknowledge is why your brain still resists action. Even when you want to act, as I mentioned to you, your brain or your emotional brain feels unsafe, or your middle brain. Effort equals threat, failure equals risk, uncertainty equals danger. That's why your brain pulls you towards scrolling, snacking, overthinking, and avoidance. To break the loop, I just want you guys to understand, you need to make action feel safe again. Because the goal isn't discipline, it is safety. You don't beat procrastination by forcing more willpower. You beat it by the following, which we're going to break down a lot more in the next following slides. Lowering your emotional resistance. Making the first step extremely small, something that I'm very vocal about. Rewarding the effort, not just the result. I want you guys to understand that if you are working right now, let me give you a social media example. Someone could start creating content. And if they're goal-oriented, they are trying to manipulate themselves by saying, "I'm going to be happy when I get 10K followers." Or I'm just going to work till I get 10K followers. Motivation in the beginning is high. Yeah, you launch yourself publicly. Yes, there's some motivational there. You start posting a few videos. But once the motivation and the dopamine wears out and you start falling off, what happens? What keeps you going? Whereas if you reward the effort, not just the result, which is all about reframing, by the way, if you reward yourself by simply just posting a video, you post a video today, you do something you like. Fantastic. You're literally reinforcing the behavior, positive reinforcement. By you rewarding the effort, it makes the journey a lot more better. It makes it a lot more enjoyable. And this is how you rewire the emotional brain. But let's actually break down the systems that make this possible. First thing we need to discuss is what constitutes habits. Now, what goes into habits? There are 3 R's that rewire your brain. To turn a behavior into a habit, your brain needs the simple loop. And I want you guys to learn this. There's a reminder, which is the cue. What triggers the habit? The routine, the behavior that you repeat, and then the reward, the emotional payoff. I want you guys to understand that without a reward, your brain won't repeat it. And let me give you guys an example. This is a good example, and I'm going to give you a bad example. Your cue or your reminder is as soon as you wake up, that is an indication that you need to journal. So what's the routine? What's the behavior that you do? You open your notebook and you write for 2 minutes. The reward, you tick off your habit tracker and feel accomplished. That's a little bit of a dopamine hit. Oh, I just ticked off my list. I feel accomplished. Today I did that first thing in the morning. Let me give you guys a more relatable example. A lot of you guys, your reminders when you wake up first thing in the morning is what? To grab your phone. I'm a victim of this as well, by the way, guys. Wake up first thing in the morning, I grab my phone. The routine now, for me, is to check my Slack, my emails, because sometimes I catch up with some work stuff, check my community, see what people are doing, check my DMs. But for most of you guys, it could quite literally be you open TikTok, Instagram, just start scrolling. You start looking for drama. And then the reward is you get a quick dopamine hit or you escape from stress. But this is more easier to form. The reason why bad habits form much easier than good habits is because bad habits give you instant rewards. It almost reinforces itself, right? And you tell yourself that felt good and easy, let's do it again tomorrow. Because when you pick up your phone and you start scrolling through social media, you're getting a lot of dopamine. You see my video, you see another video, you see someone died, you see someone made a lot of money, you see your favorite celebrity getting exposed. All of these things in your mind release so much dopamine that it kind of reinforces itself. But ultimately, to create a habit, you need to understand what is the cue, Like, what is the trigger? What is the routine? What's the behavior that you do once the trigger happens? And what's the reward? And I want you guys to understand that a routine or a habit doesn't form without a reward. But I want also to discuss that a lot of people confuse routines with habits. This is just a bit of a tangential point, and I want to explain this a bit further. The difference between routine and habits are routines are very intentional, habits are purely second nature. For example, something you choose to do, but it takes effort, intention, or motivation. If I want to go to the gym today, and let's say I just started going to the gym last week, I'm gonna have to be very intentional with going to the gym because it's not second nature. Reading books is the same thing. In order for a routine to become a habit, it needs to be intentional. You need to kind of, I wanna say force yourself, but you need to have the right systems in place that the behavior becomes easier to replicate. Habits are very second nature. For example, brain rotting on social media is a habit. Anytime you feel awkward silence, you pick up your phone. That is a habit. That's not a routine. You know that picking up your phone gives you an instant dopamine hit, and then it reinforces the behavior. If you still have to force it, it's not a habit yet, it's just a routine. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is, in order to form habits, you first need to have a routine. And in order to have a routine, you're gonna have to have a low barrier of entry, do the minimum amount of work, and reward your efforts as you continue. So now, the most important part of this video: how do you build an identity that follows through, right? So what actually works in this case? Because I don't want you guys to become someone that just tries to do the thing. I want you to become the kind of person who just does it. First thing we need to identify is how your identity drives everything. There are 3 layers of change that I want you to be aware of. Number 1 is appearance, the way people see, the way you carry yourself, the kind of clothes you wear, and so on and so forth. Performance is what you do, your habits, your efforts, right? How deep you look into things. But the most important thing that changes all of these things, which I've made a video on before, is your identity, essentially who you believe you are, the story you tell yourself. And this is one of my favorite quotes, right? Every action that you do is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. So choose wisely. But the main thing I want you to understand is, what story do you tell yourself? I mentioned earlier about feedback loops. A lot of you guys that constantly tell yourself negative things all the time are literally forming an identity of someone that is a failure, a victim, and someone who cannot do what is required. This is one of my favorite parts. Work with your energy, not against it. No one has probably ever told you this, because on the internet, what do they say? Make sure you're a morning person. Make sure you're a night person. Grind non-stop. Hustle culture. Blah, 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 blah. The best thing I learned 3 years ago was work with your energy, not against it. Work when you feel the sharpest. What does that mean? If you tell me right now, I work better in the nighttime, start off working in the nighttime, because that's when you feel the most energized. Don't follow other people's routines and structures if it doesn't fit yours. And I'm not trying to reinforce bad sleeping patterns and a bad lifestyle, but if you can wholeheartedly tell me, look, bro, I work better in the nighttime, that's where you should form your habit. That's where you should actually do the work. For example, for me, I used to be a night person. And the one thing I believe in life is you have to go through a lot of iterations. So for me, I used to work in the nighttime a lot until I became good at what it is that I was doing. And then I realized if I start waking up a bit earlier and doing my work in the morning, I may have a lot more time throughout the day to do what I want. So now my evenings and nighttime is when I relax, and my daytimes is when I do a lot more work. But in the beginning, that doesn't matter. You need to find when you are the most energetic and work with it. That's the most important thing. The next thing is sprint, then recover. A lot of people need to understand that when you are doing work, and I've given you guys an example here, right? Do work for about 20 to 30 minutes, then take a break. When you take a break, give yourself a reward that you like. I don't advocate this, but in the beginning, if you want to form a habit and you work for 30 minutes, and you scroll on TikTok for 10 minutes, so be it. You can optimize later. In the beginning, consistency is all that matters. If you start doing work for 10, 15 minutes and you can do a few cycles of these, and in between you do what you want, be my guest. The next thing is scheduling your hardest task during your mental peaks. For me personally, what works for me is anytime I've got something hard to do, I always tell myself, let me do it when I feel the most energetic, because that's the only time I can give it attention. Otherwise, I'm going to procrastinate. So for me, first thing in the morning is typically when I get rid of most of the most laborious, boring tasks that I know I probably won't do. As it gets through towards the evening, I actually do a lot more creative work. So If I'm recording like a YouTube video, or if I'm recording a video like this that requires a lot of energy and a lot of thought, I have to do this first thing in the morning. But if I'm recording a video that, sometimes I want to be a bit creative, bit relaxed, I may record it in the nighttime. But the one thing I want you to understand in this whole slide is work with your energy, not against it. Stop conforming to societal norms. Just because someone tells you have to be an early bird doesn't mean you have to be an early bird. If you feel like you can do most of the work during the evening, do it during the evening, in the beginning. When you reach a stage where you are now optimized, then obviously, or when you reach a stage that you become good at what you're doing, part of optimization now could be, you know what, let me actually start doing things a bit earlier in the day. So in the beginning, do not overcomplicate it. To get rid of procrastination, work with your energy, not against it. And lastly, I did mention take breaks, not scroll breaks. But in the beginning, just to clarify, I want you guys to do what you feel like you like. For me, my real break sometimes is going downstairs, talking to my mum, if I am back in London. If not, I walk around my compound in the UAE. Or sometimes if I give myself a 35, 40-minute break, sometimes I go to the gym. I've got a gym 2 minutes from my house, go do a quick workout, come back. As I said, give yourself rewards based on what you like. Then after a while, you can optimize. And I want you guys to understand that willpower is a battery. Willpower is finite. When you wake up first thing in the morning, after sleep, your willpower is extremely high. Food re-energizes your willpower. Movement and meditation as well. Stress drains your willpower. Lack of sleep drains your willpower. Decisions drain your willpower. Which is why, even thinking about decisions, if you are to make a big decision, or if you want to make a massive decision in your life, doing it when you have the most energy is always the best. And willpower depletes throughout the day. But if you're somebody, as I said, that works through the nighttime, your willpower may be function different to mine. But I know when I wake up first thing in the morning, if I have a long task to do, I have to get over and done with. Now, I'm going to give you guys a mini system to beat procrastination. If you listen to this carefully, with everything that has been said, it's going to allow you to really curb your procrastination and move forward in life. So, first things first, lower the bloody bar. I've been screaming this for 1 year now. If you're somebody that wants to start something new, do the bare minimum. For example, if you're somebody that doesn't go to the gym at all, the worst thing you can do is optimize your gym structure or schedule to go 7 days a week and do 2 hours in the gym each day. Makes no sense. The best thing you can do for yourself is to go to the gym maybe 2-3 times a week for like 45 minutes, 1 hour. Do the bare minimum workouts in there until you build consistency. Consistency, intensity. Intensity doesn't come before consistency, because intensity without consistency leads to burnout. Right? So when you start something, the reason why you procrastinate is because your mind is ringing alarm bells. Why do the alarm bells ring? I'm doing too much too soon. Lower the bloody bar so the barrier of entry to actually do work is literally on the floor. So that on your worst days, you can still do work. Using sprint windows is something that I do regularly. Work in short bursts in the beginning. So if you can only do 15 minutes, stick to 15 minutes. For me right now, my short bursts are about 45 minutes to an hour. So I'll do an hour, chill for 15 minutes, do an hour, chill for 15 minutes. And in those 15 minutes, I kid you not, I do what I want. If I want to brain rot, I'm going to brain rot. If I want to go downstairs, talk to someone, I'm going to do it. If I want to make a quick sandwich, I'm going to do it. The aim of the game isn't to focus on what you reward yourself with. Do what you want, but make sure in those sprinting windows, you're fully focused. And in your mind, psychologically, when you are working in those times, or 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes or 60 minutes, you know that you've got a reward coming. So it's easier to maintain that behavior. Whereas indifference, if you remember, if you know that there's no reward on the end of it or at the end of it, it's very hard to maintain. The third one is something that's more of an advanced step. It's from Atomic Habits, which is stacking or habit stacking. If you've already got a habit that you do regularly, attach it to something else. So for example, if you got a habit making a coffee first thing in the morning, if you make your coffee first thing in the morning, why don't you just take your laptop with you and then just do work as soon as you make your coffee? So drink your coffee, do your work. Another thing could be, if you are somebody that wants to read and that's a habit you want to get into, why don't you make a habit where every time you do your night routine, maybe your skincare, you get into bed, you make your bed, why don't you try to add a book session in, maybe 5 minutes? As I said, lower the bar, read for 5 minutes. The next thing is feel the reward. This is the most important thing. Indifference is a real problem when it comes to procrastination. As I said, Make the reward whatever the hell you want. Whenever you do work, make sure you enjoy the reward. I'll give you a very unpopular opinion here. The amount of people that I tell, if you are somebody that starts going to the gym, you don't need to focus on diet when you start going to the gym. The aim of the game is to make the gym something consistent, and then you can focus on diet. So I'll give you guys a real life example. When I started going to the gym, I literally only used to focus on making the gym a regular habit. I used to eat what I wanted. I used to go eat a burger. I used to eat chocolates, cakes, whatever I wanted. But until the gym became very consistent, diet didn't matter. But when it did, I started to fix my diet. So feeling the reward is very important because you need to focus on getting that consistent action in. What you reward yourself with is your choice. Someone might say, oh, brain rotting is bad. But if I'm doing work and I'm brain rotting at the same time, that works for me. Later on, when things start making sense, perhaps I can optimize that. And lastly, have a way back. I think this is very important. It's part of emotional regulation. When you fall off, do not attach emotions to falling off. Just tell yourself, or ask yourself, why did I fall off? And if it is a viable reason, fantastic, move on. If it's an unreasonable one where you purely became emotional, write it down. Keep track of the things that commonly force you to fall off, and then optimize from there. But for me personally, if I fall off, I don't sit there dwelling on why I fell off and how my life is so bad and how things are not working out for me, because guess what? That takes mental energy. But what am I going to focus on? Moving forward. So as I said, when you slip, just do the next tiny task. That is the reset. Spending time dwelling on why the thing didn't happen and how many days you spent away from that thing is a literal time waste. So as I said, lower the bloody bar. Use a sprint window. Stacking to something real, I would say leave for later, but feel the reward. When you do the work and you do your sprint window, reward yourself with what you want. Go brain rot, go eat a chocolate, do whatever makes you happy. We will optimize later. And lastly, have a way back. If you do fall off, don't attach any emotions to it. Rather get up, ask yourself why it happened and move forward. Let me give you guys some final words now, right? If your brain fights you, it's not because you're lazy, it is because it's scared. And that's the unfortunate reality, has nothing to do with laziness. Procrastination isn't a willpower issue. It is a nervous system loop you can retrain, one small win at a time, which is why I keep telling you guys, if you are able to stack these small wins, you would inevitably be very consistent. And stop waiting for the perfect mood, man. I just feel like, all the times you procrastinate and tell yourself, I'll do it when I feel good, that's literally your brain trying to protect you from the inevitable. And I don't want you guys to be ambitious failures, because that's not a very nice lifestyle. And I think when you grow older, you end up realizing that nobody cares about your potential. Potential doesn't matter anymore. Potential matters when you're in your teenage, maybe early 20s. When you reach my age and you're closer to 30, nobody cares about your potential. They're going to say, yo, what do you do with your life? Where's your current life at? Do you have kids? Do you have money? Do you have a job? If not, nobody cares about your potential. So I want you guys to show up even in the smallest way. And that's how you stop procrastinating. So I want you guys to recap this, watch it as many times as possible. The main aim of this is to do small tasks that teach your brain that taking action is safe. Once your alarm bells stop ringing, you'll start to realize that you can slowly build up your appetite. But in the beginning, start off very small. Don't bash yourself when you fall off. And I can almost promise you, procrastination will be a thing of the past.